I came home with a chest full of medals, and a mind I didn't recognize. People clapped at the airport. Some even stood and cheered. A stranger handed me his coffee and just said, "Thank you." I smiled back, said no problem, like it was nothing. But the truth was, I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like anything at all. You spend enough time in a war zone, and something inside you changes. Some part of you hardens. Some part of you dies. And the part that comes back, it doesn't always fit the world you left behind. I stood there in that arrival terminal, my duffel bag over my shoulder, the American flag patch still stitched on my chest, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. My mom was crying. My little sister jumped into my arms. My dad gave me that firm, quiet nod, the way he always did when he was proud but didn't know how to say it. We went home, had a barbecue, the neighbors came by. Everyone wanted to shake my hand and tell me how brave I was. But no one asked what it cost. They didn't ask about the sleepless nights, or the things I saw, or the sound of a child screaming in a language I couldn't understand. They didn't ask about the guys we lost. About the friend who didn't make it back. About the ones who did, but weren't whole anymore. And I didn't offer. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you put into words a kind of pain that doesn't bleed, doesn't bruise, but just sits inside you, loud, heavy, constant? So I smiled. I drank. I said I was fine, I laughed at the right moments, told a few clean stories, left out the real ones. But inside, I was unraveling. Coming home wasn't the end of the war. For me, it was the beginning of a whole new kind of battle, one no one saw coming. One no one prepared me for. And this is the story of how I survived it.
I came home with a chest full of medals, and a mind I didn't recognize. People clapped at the airport. Some even stood and cheered. A stranger handed me his coffee, and just said, "Thank you." I smiled back, said, "No problem," like it was nothing. But the truth was, I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like anything at all. You spend enough time in a war zone, and something inside you changes. Some part of you hardens. Some part of you dies. And the part that comes back, it doesn't always fit the world you left behind. I stood there in that arrival terminal, my duffel bag over my shoulder, the American flag patch still stitched on my chest, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. My mom was crying. My little sister jumped into my arms. My dad gave me that firm, quiet nod, the way he always did when he was proud but didn't know how to say it. We went home, had a barbecue. The neighbors came by. Everyone wanted to shake my hand and tell me how brave I was. But no one asked what it cost. They didn't ask about the sleepless nights, or the things I saw, or the sound of a child screaming in a language I couldn't understand. They didn't ask about the guys we lost, about the friend who didn't make it back, about the ones who did, but weren't whole anymore. And I didn't offer. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you put into words a kind of pain that doesn't bleed, doesn't bruise, but just sits inside you, loud, heavy, constant? So I smiled. I drank. I said I was fine. I laughed at the right moments, told a few clean stories, left out the real ones. But inside, I was unraveling. Coming home wasn't the end of the war. For me, it was the beginning of a whole new kind of battle, one no one saw coming, one no one prepared me for. And this is the story of how I survived it. Before the uniform, before the war, before the nightmares, I was just a kid from a small Texas town. We had one grocery store, 2 stoplights, and a football team that mattered more than church. I wasn't the star quarterback or the valedictorian. I was the quiet one, the one who kept his head down, did his homework, and tried not to get in trouble. My world was made up of dusty backroads, bonfires on weekends, and the sound of cicadas buzzing late into the night. My dad worked construction, hard, honest work. Came home every day with dirt on his boots, and a stiffness in his walk that told stories his mouth never did. My mom worked nights at the hospital. We weren't poor, but we were never ahead. I always felt like I was waiting for something more, something bigger than our small town routine. Then 9/11s happened. I was 14. I remember watching the towers fall on our tiny living room TV, the grainy footage playing over and over, people running, screaming, covered in ash. I didn't know what to feel, anger, fear, confusion, but I remember the silence in our house that night. My dad said something like, "The world just changed," and I believed him. By the time I graduated high school, I didn't have a plan. College wasn't in the cards, and I didn't want to spend my life swinging a hammer like my old man. I wanted purpose. I wanted to do something that mattered. And deep down, I think I just wanted to be seen, to be part of something bigger than me, something that made people proud. So I enlisted. The Army recruiter had a firm handshake, and a glossy brochure full of promises. Travel the world. Build discipline. Make a difference. I signed my name before I told my parents. My dad just nodded again. My mom cried. My sister asked if I was going to be a hero. I didn't know how to answer that. All I knew was that the world was on fire, and I didn't want to sit around and watch it burn. I wanted to stand for something. I wanted to be somebody. Turns out, I had no idea what I was signing up for. I deployed to Afghanistan when I was just barely 20. I still had that green look in my eyes, like the world hadn't knocked me around yet. I thought I was ready. Thought the training, the drills, the late-night ruck marches had prepared me for what was coming. They hadn't. The first thing that hit me wasn't fear, it was the heat. Dry, suffocating, like the air itself didn't want you to breathe. Then came the silence. That's the part nobody tells you about. War isn't loud, not at first. It's long stretches of dead silence. You wait, and wait, and wait, until something explodes. And when it does, everything goes black and white. You hear your heart. You forget your name. Our unit was stationed out near the mountains, running patrols in villages where every kid smiled with their eyes, but never with their mouth. Every alley felt like a trap, every rooftop a threat. The hardest part wasn't the bullets, it was the second guessing. Wondering if the kid waving at you had a bomb strapped under his shirt. Wondering if you'd be the one who didn't come back that day. Then came that mission. We were clearing a compound on a hot morning in July. Routine sweep, nothing unusual. I was in the middle of the stack, just behind Staff Sergeant Wilson. We breached the door, and for about 2 seconds, everything was still. Then a blast knocked me on my back, ears ringing, dirt in my mouth. Screams, smoke, shouting overcomes. 3 of our guys didn't make it. One of them had just become a dad the week before. I still remember the way Wilson's helmet rolled across the ground. Just rolled, like it had been dropped in a gym. That image never left me. Not in dreams, not in daylight. They called us heroes afterward, said we held the line. But that day didn't feel like heroism. It felt like survival. Dirty, panicked, desperate survival. After that, something in me changed. I smiled less, slept less, trusted less, and the silence between attacks became heavier, like it knew something I didn't. That was the beginning of the version of me that would eventually come home and find out that the real war wasn't over. Everyone talks about coming home like it's this beautiful thing. Like the end of the movie, credits rolling, the hero walking off into the sunset. That's what I expected too. But that's not what happened. When I landed stateside, people clapped. Some held signs. A little boy handed me a folded up crayon drawing that said, "Thank you, soldier." I smiled for pictures, shook hands, nodded when someone said I looked stronger or different. But on the inside, I felt like a mannequin, hollow, just going through the motions. I went back to my hometown, back to the same streets I used to ride my bike down, back to the same kitchen table, where my mom used to serve up pancakes on Sunday mornings. But nothing felt the same. The walls were quieter, the air was heavier. I'd sit on the porch for hours, staring at nothing. My family tried, they really did, but I wasn't the same, and I didn't know how to explain why. I couldn't sleep, not real sleep, anyway, just short, twitchy stretches, where I'd jerk awake sweating, heart racing, like I was still back there. Loud noises made me flinch, crowds made my skin crawl, and the worst part, I couldn't talk about it. Not really. People would ask, "So how was it over there?" And I'd just shrug. What was I supposed to say? It was hell. It changed me. I watched friends die and came home feeling like a ghost. So I lied. I smiled and said, it wasn't too bad. Then I'd go home, sit in the dark, and drink until I couldn't feel the weight anymore. I started skipping calls, ignoring texts, even from people I cared about. I didn't want to burden them. Didn't want them to see how much I was unraveling. Some days, I didn't even recognize the man in the mirror. My uniform was in a box under my bed, and my medals were shoved in a drawer I never opened. On the outside, I was home, but inside, I was still in the desert, still on patrol, still hearing the radio crackle just before the world exploded. They told us how to survive war, but no one ever taught us how to survive peace. You don't notice it at first. The breaking, it doesn't come all at once, like in the movies. There's no dramatic meltdown, no screaming into a mirror. It's slow, quiet, like a house rotting from the inside. Still standing, still looks fine from the street, but step inside and the floor's already caving in. That was me. I told people I was fine, and they believed me. Why wouldn't they? I still showed up to family dinners, still said, "Thank you for your service," with a nod, like it didn't make my stomach twist. I even laughed sometimes. But every night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the same crack in the ceiling, drinking cheap whiskey like it was medicine. And every morning, I'd wake up feeling a little less like myself. I stopped showing up to things, missed birthdays, ghosted friends, even stopped going to the VIA. What was the point? I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to relive anything. I just wanted to forget. But forgetting doesn't come easy when your mind plays the same reel over and over. Wilson's helmet rolling across the floor. The silence after the blast. The face of the kid holding the trigger. The smell of blood in the heat. It's all there. Every single day. Then came the night. It was late. I don't even remember what triggered it. Maybe a sound. Maybe nothing at all. I was on my third drink, then fourth, sitting on the floor in the dark. I remember holding my phone, hovering over my sister's contact. Wanted to call. Wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. So I just sat there, spinning. And for a second, just a second, I thought about ending it. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a whisper disappearing into the night. That was my lowest point. But something stopped me. I don't know what. Maybe it was her face on the phone screen. Maybe it was the fact that I hadn't fed the dog yet. Maybe I just wasn't ready. But I put the bottle down, crawled into bed, and cried myself to sleep like a damn child. That was the night I realized, if I didn't change something, I wasn't going to make it. I had survived war. But if I didn't find a reason to keep surviving this, I was already gone. I wasn't looking for help that night. Honestly, I wasn't looking for anything but escape from myself, from the noise in my head, from the weight that was crushing me. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that makes the streets slick and the world feel smaller. I found myself wandering aimlessly, soaked through, my boots sloshing in puddles. My phone was dead. I didn't want to call anyone, didn't want anyone to know where I was. Eventually, I ducked into a small Veterans of Foreign Wars hall, a place I'd never been before but remembered hearing about. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the warmth hit me like a punch. Inside, a handful of older vets sat around tables, talking quietly, nursing drinks, watching the rain through foggy windows. I sat at the bar, trying to make myself invisible. Then, an old man slid onto the stool beside me. He didn't say much at first, just nodded and lit a cigarette, like he'd been waiting for someone like me all night. His eyes didn't judge, they just understood. I felt like I was being seen for the first time in a long time. We didn't talk much, just shared a few sips of cheap beer in the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. He told me about his own battles, the ones you don't see, his lost friends, his nights like mine, the times he almost gave up. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. That night didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the nightmares or the guilt, but it cracked something open inside me, the door to hope, the first step toward healing. After that, I started going back, not every night, but often enough to feel the difference. The stories, the nods, the quiet company, they became my lifeline. Slowly, I found the courage to talk a little more, to listen a little more, and somewhere in that dimly lit room, I found the first spark of a reason to keep fighting, not just for my country, but for myself. After a while, those nights at the VFW hall gave me something I hadn't had in a long time, a way to put the pieces back together. But the words didn't come easy. For years, I had bottled everything inside, anger, fear, shame, pain, all locked away like secrets too heavy to carry. One night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I grabbed a notebook and started to write. At first, it was just random thoughts, scattered and messy. I wrote about the heat of the desert sun, the silence before an ambush, the way my hands shook as I loaded my weapon. I wrote about my friends, those who came home and those who didn't, and I wrote about the things I was too scared to say out loud. It felt strange, almost like therapy, but without the therapist. Slowly, writing became a habit. I'd wake up early and scribble before the world was awake. Sometimes, I wrote long into the night, the words flowing out like a floodgate finally opening. It was painful, but it was also freeing. Eventually, I started sharing some of those writings online. I never expected anyone to read them. I was anonymous, just a voice in a sea of stories. But then the messages started coming in. Other vets, strangers, even family members reaching out to say they understood. They told me my words helped them feel less alone. That's when I realized something powerful. I wasn't just fighting my own silence. I was breaking it for others too. Writing became more than just an outlet. It became a weapon against the darkness that tried to swallow me whole. Every word I typed chipped away at the walls I'd built around myself. Every story shared was a step toward healing. It wasn't magic. It wasn't easy. Some days, the pain came back tenfold, but I was learning to live with it, not run from it. Through writing, I found a voice I thought I lost forever. And that voice, it was going to help me tell the world the truth about what it really means to come home from war. After months of writing and sharing my story, something unexpected happened. I found purpose. Not the kind you get from medals or speeches, but something deeper, a reason to get out of bed. When the weight of the past felt unbearable, I started getting invitations to speak at schools, veterans groups, even small community centers. At first, it terrified me, standing in front of a crowd, sharing my darkest moments. That wasn't who I thought I was. But every time I spoke, I felt a little lighter, a little stronger. What surprised me the most was the response. People, especially younger veterans, came up afterward, thanking me for being real, for telling the story no one else would, for giving voice to the silent battles they were fighting alone. It wasn't about being a hero, it was about being honest. I also began volunteering with nonprofits focused on veteran mental health. Helping others gave me a way to channel my pain into something good. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was making a difference. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. I still had bad days, nights when the memories felt as sharp as ever. But now, I had a reason to keep going, a new mission that gave me strength. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about facing the past head-on, scars and all. It's about accepting that some wounds never fully heal, but that doesn't mean you can't live a full life anyway. The uniform I once wore with pride had been replaced by a different kind of armor, resilience. And every time I shared my story, I added a little more strength to that armor. This journey wasn't about erasing the war. It was about living despite it, about finding peace in the fight, and maybe, just maybe, about helping others find their way home too. You'd think the hardest battle would be the one fought overseas. But for me, and so many like me, the war didn't end when we came home. The memories, the guilt, the silence, they followed me through every room, every conversation, every quiet night. It's a weight that never really lifts, no matter how far you run or how many medals you earn. What most people don't see is the invisible battlefield inside. The fights we have every day to keep moving forward, to stay connected, to find meaning in a world that feels distant and unfamiliar. I won't lie. Some days are still dark. Some nights, the past tries to swallow me whole. But I've learned to live with that darkness, not let it define me. Writing my story, sharing my truth, helping others who struggle. It's what keeps me grounded. It's what reminds me that I'm not alone, and neither are they. I carry the faces of my fallen brothers and sisters with me every day. Their memories push me to be better, to fight not just for myself, but for all of us who have walked this path. And I want the world to know this. Coming home isn't always a victory. It's often the beginning of a new fight. But it's a fight worth fighting, because survival isn't just about living. It's about finding purpose, about reclaiming your life from the shadows. It's about remembering that the uniform might come off, but the courage stays. So if you're listening, and you're struggling, know this. You're not broken. You're not alone. There's a whole brotherhood and sisterhood out here ready to stand with you. And together, we keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for each other. Because some battles never end, but neither does the strength to face them. This journey wasn't about erasing the war. It was about living despite it, about finding peace in the fight, and maybe, just maybe, about helping others find their way home too. If you think this story ends here, you're wrong. Because the truth is, my journey didn't just stop after I found purpose, or started speaking out. There was one last chapter one never saw coming. Not long ago, I found myself sitting in a hospital room, not because of a wound from the battlefield, but because my body had finally begun to catch up with my mind. PTSD isn't just a mental fight, it's a physical one too. Heart problems, chronic pain, sleepless nights, they all became part of the battle I never trained for. At one point, I even faced the possibility of losing everything again, the family I had rebuilt, the friends who believed in me, the small light of hope that kept me moving forward. But that hospital room was also where I realized something else. Survival isn't just about the moments of strength. It's about the moments when you feel weakest, and still choose to fight. As I looked out the window that day, I thought about all the veterans whose stories don't make headlines. The ones who don't get medals or speeches. The ones who fight silent wars, every day, often forgotten. That's why I'm sharing this now. Because the real heroism is in the everyday battles, the ones no one sees, but so many of us live through. And here's the truth no one talks about enough. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's complicated, and sometimes it feels impossible, but it's still worth fighting for. I'm still here, still fighting, still telling my story, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because if my journey can help even one person feel less alone, then every painful step has been worth it. This isn't just my story, it's ours. It's the story of every veteran who's ever felt lost, broken, or forgotten, and still found a way back. The war may never truly end, but neither does the strength to keep going.